The year was 1883, and the American frontier stretched endlessly beneath a brilliant blue sky. Rolling grasslands, dusty wagon trails, and weathered wooden ranches defined the quiet wilderness where survival depended on hard work and courage. On a lonely ranch far from the nearest town lived Elias Carter, a widowed rancher known for his honesty, quiet strength, and willingness to help anyone in need. Since losing his wife to a harsh winter fever 3 years earlier, Elias had buried himself in work. From sunrise until dusk, he repaired fences, cared for horses, branded cattle, and kept his modest ranch standing against the unforgiving prairie winds. Though respected by every rancher in the county, he carried a loneliness that no amount of work could erase. Every morning followed the same familiar rhythm. Elias saddled his trusted chestnut horse, checked the grazing cattle, replaced broken fence posts, and repaired whatever the storms had damaged during the night. His small wooden cabin overlooked a wide valley filled with waving grass and distant hills, but the peaceful view only reminded him how silent life had become. The laughter that once echoed through the ranch had disappeared with his wife, leaving only the sounds of creaking windmills and restless horses. Even so, Elias refused to abandon the land they had built together. He believed a rancher's word and determination were worth more than gold, and he honored that belief every single day. Late one warm afternoon, while Elias hammered fresh boards onto a corral fence, he noticed a rider approaching from the distant trail. Dust rose behind the horse as the traveler slowly came closer. It was a young woman riding a tired bay mare, dressed in a faded brown frontier dress with sturdy leather boots and a weathered bonnet shielding her face from the sun. She looked exhausted from the long journey, yet she sat proudly in the saddle, despite obvious fatigue. When she finally stopped at the ranch gate, Elias saw that worry filled her gentle eyes. She introduced herself as Clara Whitmore, speaking politely, but with a quiet hesitation that suggested she had rehearsed every word before arriving. Clara explained that her late father's homestead stood several miles away, abandoned since his passing the previous autumn. She said a heavy storm had damaged the front gate, leaving it hanging crooked on broken hinges. Alone, and without anyone else to ask, she hoped Elias might help repair it before wandering livestock destroyed what little remained of the property. Her request sounded simple enough, and Elias had repaired hundreds of gates throughout his life. Yet something about her voice caught his attention. She wasn't truly worried about broken wood or rusted iron. Her eyes drifted nervously toward the empty prairie behind her, as though she feared someone might appear at any moment. Though she tried to hide it, sadness and unease lingered in every expression. Without asking unnecessary questions, Elias agreed to help. He gathered his tools, loaded fresh timber, nails, rope, and a hammer into his wagon, then saddled his horse beside Clara's. Together they traveled across miles of golden prairie beneath the afternoon sun. The journey was mostly silent, except for the steady rhythm of hooves and wagon wheels crunching over dry earth. Occasionally, Elias noticed Clara glance over her shoulder, studying the distant horizon with growing concern. Each time he looked back, he saw nothing except endless grasslands and scattered cottonwood trees swaying gently in the breeze. Her nervous behavior only deepened his curiosity, but he respected her privacy enough not to press for answers. As the sun slowly drifted lower, they reached the Whitmore homestead. The once proud ranch now looked forgotten by time. Weather-beaten fences leaned at awkward angles, the barn roof sagged from years of neglect, and weeds covered the yard where children had once played. The front gate hung loosely from a single hinge, creaking whenever the wind passed through. Elias climbed down from his horse and carefully examined the damage. Although the gate certainly needed repairs, he quickly realized it was far less serious than Clara had described. A skilled rancher could fix it within an hour. The simplicity of the task made him wonder why she had ridden so far to seek his help instead of asking a nearby neighbor. While Elias unloaded his tools, Clara remained unusually quiet near the porch of the old farmhouse. She stared at the weathered building with tears gathering in her eyes, as though painful memories surrounded every faded board. After a long silence, she slowly walked toward Elias, her hands trembling slightly beneath her worn gloves. The prairie breeze carried away every sound except her soft footsteps. Looking directly into his eyes, she finally whispered the words she had been hiding since arriving at his ranch. "The gate isn't what truly needs fixing." In that single moment, Elias understood he had not been brought there to repair broken wood. Whatever burden Clara carried was far heavier than any ranch chore, and he sensed the real reason for her visit was only beginning to unfold. Inside the quiet farmhouse, Clara finally gathered the courage to reveal the truth she had been carrying for months. Her late father had owned hundreds of acres of valuable grazing land, but before his death, he discovered that a powerful cattle baron named Victor Hayes intended to seize it through forged papers and intimidation. Knowing the danger, her father secretly hid the original land deed and a signed journal describing the boundaries of the property. Before taking his final breath, he told Clara that if honest people ever stood beside her, she should return to the ranch and uncover the truth. She had come to Elias not because she needed a carpenter, but because every rancher in the county believed his word was stronger than any contract. Elias listened without interrupting. He understood how easily powerful men could crush lonely families on the frontier when no one was willing to stand beside them. Looking around the old farmhouse, he noticed that despite years of neglect, Clara's father had carefully maintained everything before his death. That meant the hidden documents were probably placed somewhere he trusted to last for generations. Remembering the old rancher's habit of hiding valuables beneath heavy beams and fence posts, Elias suggested they search the barn before darkness settled across the prairie. Together, they walked through the weathered building, brushing away dust, moving broken barrels, and lifting old tools that had not been touched in years. Near the back wall stood a thick wooden support post that looked newer than the others. Elias knelt beside it and noticed fresh hammer marks beneath layers of dried dirt. Using his crowbar, he carefully loosened the timber while Clara held a lantern close enough to light the ground. Hidden beneath the post rested a small iron box wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture. Clara's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside lay the original land deed bearing the official county seal, her father's handwritten journal, tax receipts, and a letter explaining every attempt Victor Hayes had made to steal the ranch. Tears filled Clara's eyes as she realized her father's final plan had survived exactly as he intended. Before they could celebrate, the sound of galloping horses shattered the evening silence. Victor Hayes and several armed riders appeared outside the barn, convinced that Clara had finally returned for the hidden papers. Hayes smugly ordered her to hand over the documents and leave the ranch forever, promising that no sheriff would believe a young woman living alone. Elias calmly stepped in front of Clara without drawing unnecessary attention to the iron box. He refused to surrender the papers and warned Hayes that the land belonged to its rightful owner. As the outlaws advanced, Elias used the sturdy barn doors and nearby wagons for cover, delaying them long enough for one frightened ranch hand, secretly loyal to Clara's father, to ride into town for help. The tense standoff lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours beneath the fading western sky. Just as Hayes believed victory was within reach, the distant sound of another group of horses echoed across the prairie. The town sheriff arrived with several deputies after receiving the urgent message. Elias immediately presented the original deed, the journal, and the sealed documents found inside the iron box. After carefully examining every page, the sheriff declared the evidence undeniable. Victor Hayes and his men were arrested for fraud, intimidation, and attempting to steal legally owned land. Watching the outlaw led away in handcuffs, Clara finally felt the fear that had haunted her for months begin to disappear. As the sun dipped below the golden prairie, Elias returned to the front entrance and finished repairing the broken gate exactly as he had promised. This time, however, the gate meant far more than a simple ranch chore. It marked the end of fear and the beginning of hope for a family that refused to surrender its heritage. Clara decided to restore her father's homestead instead of abandoning it, and Elias remained by her side, helping rebuild the fences, the barn, and the life that had nearly been stolen. Before leaving that evening, Clara smiled for the first time since arriving at his ranch. Elias realized that a simple request to fix a gate had opened the door to justice, friendship, and an unexpected new family in the untamed American West.